all hits all the time.
We are family.
Max Scherzer, double-digit Ks.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
Fun to watch.
Minus 15.
Respect all, fear none.
Into the upper deck.
Intensity is not a perfume.
Oh, mercy.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to MASN All Access Coffee and Comments. Sara Perlman here with Paul Mancano. A lot to talk about after this amazing FanFest weekend besides the weather and everything else. We'll get to that later. Paul, you know, first let's just address these mugs
They're
for
awesome.
a second. This Coffee and Comments mugs.
Yeah.
We're giving 2 away on the show, by the way. So if you want some of these with Gary Thorne's signature home run call, all you have to do is comment along. You will be automatically entered to win 2 of these amazing mugs. Cheers.
Cheers, indeed. These things are absolutely awesome. Love the orange inside, the white outside.
Yes.
Everything about them is great.
Yeah, so comment along. You'll automatically be entered to win 2 of these mugs, but let's get right to it. This is Coffee and Comments, so you know we got to drink the coffee, take your comments, and talk about the latest around your Baltimore Orioles. Paul, FanFest was truly so fun, first and foremost. I mean, I had such a good time. I know everyone that came did as well. What was your highlight, your takeaway from that event?
Besides your pictures, as indeed,
You
which
didn't even take a
I didn't
picture
even
with
take a
me.
picture with
Thank
you.
you
I
for
was
everyone who
a
came and
little
took a picture with me.
I was a little bit
Not
busy.
Paul.
It was really awesome. The fact that we got to see all these new names and faces and put the faces and names to each other. And get to know these guys that we haven't really seen. And also the fact that we got to see a bunch of prospects who may not even be on the team this year.
That's what I thought was really cool, being invited to FanFest.
Exactly.
Including DL Hall.
Yeah, exactly.
Ryan McKenna, a lot of people that a lot of fans didn't really get to know and introduce themselves to.
Exactly. What was your favorite part, Sara?
I think what you said, and honestly getting to know the coaching staff, that was really our first time meeting them besides Brandon Hyde and of course GM Mike Elias. So I mean, you're going to hear from them in just a few minutes, but being able to talk to them about their strategy, where they've been before, and what they're looking forward to most about Sarasota was really neat. Yeah,
and of course, interacting with all the fans at FanFest is always a great time. Yeah. Love that the MASN booth
because
is
Orioles
right in the
fans
center.
are the best. I don't
they
care
are
what
the
anyone
best.
says.
Look, this team lost 115 games last year, and 8,000 people showed up on a cold day at the Baltimore Convention Center. That's a testament to what we already knew about these Orioles fans.
I agree. I'm looking at some comments now. People really want the mugs. All right, you guys, let's comment with other things. Let's talk about really what happened, who we got to talk to, and the latest on the Orioles. I can't believe we're only a few weeks away from Sarasota, so I hope to see a lot of you there also. Brandon Hyde, he's one that sticks out to me that we must talk about first, Paul, because he has a certain aura about him that I think it's the sense that he came from Chicago. That's what I'm getting to know. When you know Joe Madden and even Davey Martinez, who obviously is with the Nats now, they have a certain calmness to them that I think has to do with working under Joe Madden for some time. And he seems so sure of himself, which is really important for a manager going through this rebuild. A few things that stuck out to me in particular was besides this aura he had with him, but him talking about the reason that he didn't hire a bench coach. He had that question coming at him so many times, and he was like, it's a title. We're all going to work together. It's pretty irrelevant who has that as long as everyone's doing their job and working together as a unit. I thought that was really interesting.
It shows that he's worried about the important things, not about the titles and the things off the field. He's worried about how can we get the best group of guys out there to coach the best group of players. And I think that something that Don Long said, his new hitting coach, was asked about his impressions and his thoughts on Brandon Hyde, and he says, what you see is what you get. This guy is consistent every day. He's not going to go too high. He's not going to go too low. And he's going to be honest and genuine when he's dealing with the press, when he's dealing with the players. That could not be more important when dealing with young players and when going through a long-term rebuild like this. He has to be consistent on a daily basis and patient. Those are going to be his 2 biggest keys as he oversees this Orioles rebuild.
Yep, absolutely true, Paul. Brandon Hyde said a few really standout things. We're going to play the first one to you. Really him saying it's a clean slate. It reminds him of his time in Chicago when everyone was fighting for a spot. He hasn't seen that in a while. There's so many players that are not sure if they're going to make the team, make the 40-man, and how they're going to perform in spring training. So let's take a look to see what manager Brandon Hyde had to say about this clean slate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a clean slate with me, you know. I came from a pretty good spot where we had, you know, in spring training, maybe there was a spot or 2 open when camp started. This is different. This is more of how it was in 12 and 13 and 14 there, where, you know, there's a lot of young, interesting guys that we can't wait to start developing. And whether they're ready to make the big league team or not, I can't tell you right now. But I think that's a great situation for a lot of guys. And there's obviously innings on the mound, and there's ABs to be had, and to have the opportunity to win a job, I think is, as a player, I think that's what you want.
Well, a lot of players are going to be fighting for a position, especially in that infield. You look yesterday, a move was made. I see people commenting along, wondering what's going on. The Orioles claimed Jack Reinheimer off waivers, so that was something a little interesting, only because Austin Bryce was on the 40-man for about a week, it seemed like, and then he was DFA'd. So you look at his stats there, just 21 games last year with the Mets, a hit 167. But you know what? He's a utility guy. He's going to fight for a spot in spring training, so this was made yesterday. I was a little bit shocked just because it seems like they had some competition going in there, but I guess never enough, especially when you have a guy like him that's really good at defense.
Absolutely, and we're going to look at the infield list in a little bit, but looking at Reinheimer specifically, he did spend time with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Before that, played in just 6 games with them. Obviously not a whole lot of major league experience, but when you look up and down this infield list, really nobody besides Jonathan Villar has any major league experience. Here's the list. Jonathan Villar has 617 MLB games under his belt.
Yep.
Next closest guy is Renato Nunez at 90 games. Nobody else has over 100 games played. They're all between ages 24 and 27. A lot of young guys competing for these spots. It's not a very experienced group, but they're hoping they can get something out of these guys. I mean, they're probably going to play Richie Martin to start the season at shortstop. He's never played a game beyond Double-A, so there's a lot of youth there, and a lot of guys are going to get opportunities, which is what Hyde touched on.
Yeah, I think one thing that stands out in particular about Reinheimer is just that he's so versatile in all the positions. You look at what he's played in the minor leagues, and it's a never-ending list. Shortstop, second base, third base, and left field. He also owns a .343 on-base percentage in the minor leagues over those 6 seasons, so this is a guy that can clearly fight for a utility spot. That's something you always need, especially in a rebuilding young team like you have in the Orioles. I don't see the risk here. I feel bad for Austin Bryce just because it was such a quick stint on the 40-man for him. He was DFA'd, but I'm excited to see who will fight for this opportunity. I mean, I had the chance to luckily talk to Steve Wilkerson last week, which I think was pretty interesting. This is a guy that didn't perform last season in the big leagues. He goes to the Arizona Fall League, had a much better time and experience out there. He's someone looking to make the big league roster as well, so I think when you have in-house competition, it makes everyone better, and I think they're all trying to cut their teeth a little bit, and this is a really good opportunity to show themselves with a new manager and new staff.
Definitely.
And that's something they were all looking forward to, having new eyes on them, something fresh.
What Brandon Hyde meant basically by it's a clean slate means anything that you did under that old managerial staff, that's out the window. We're just looking at what you're doing starting this spring training and going forward. So he's got a totally clean slate with this. It's going to be interesting because this is the first time he and Mike Elias are truly overseeing a roster and looking at the roster saying, who do we want to keep and who do we want to let go? And they're obviously going to lean heavily towards youth, but sometimes veteran players can have a career resurgence on rebuilding teams. That happens all the time. So I would say that they're probably going to lean more towards youthful guys. If they see 2 guys who have identical stats or perform the same, they're going to say, okay, this guy's 24, this guy's 27, let's go with the 24-year-old. Which would make guys like Steve Wilkerson have an uphill battle. But sometimes these guys face career resurgences at age 27, 28, 29. So I'll be interested to see how much they go with the young guys and how much they say, maybe this guy's a veteran, but he's still got something that he can show us.
And they're not done. I mean, we talked to Mike Elias and any possible moves they could make. There's obviously a chance they go after a free agent. He did say the likelihood would probably be someone on a 1-year deal because they're not going to sign someone to a 2-3-year deal with the status of the team and with them in the middle of a rebuild. That was something to look out for, of course, as well. I don't think they're done. I think they're going to have more competition, and they'll look for those last-minute veteran deals. That could even be trade chips when you look into July. So Mike Elias knows what he's doing. He's been through the rebuild with the Astros. Brandon Hyde's been through a rebuild, of course, with the Cubs. I think one other thing we must talk about with Brandon Hyde before we flip the subject a little bit is the fact when I asked him how important is it to have relationships with these players, because every single player that came into the media room during FanFest said, I just met him, I've talked to him on the phone, or we've had a brief discussion, and he just seems like a guy that wants to get to know my family, that wants to have this open door policy. So I asked Brandon Hyde, why? How important is that to have this amazing relationship with players before the season starts? Take a look.
Most important thing for me is to get to know them as people first, and the way you make impact, the way you coach impactfully is by having a relationship there first. And if there's no relationship, then it's a lot harder. So I think to really dive into them early, try to call as many guys as I could, get down to Sarasota, meeting with some of the players. That was really, really important. So then when we jump in second week of February, then it's we can get the ball rolling on it and not have so much newness.
What you see really is what you get with Brandon Hyde, and a lot of fans have already responded positively to that.
Sure.
We're taking your comments, obviously, on Coffee and Comments. Andrea Coates saying, sounds like from what they're saying, Hyde is willing to put in the effort and work with his coaches to help improve this team. I sure hope he is effective. I do hope so too, but it does sound like he's putting in the work. He's not focused on the outside distractions. He knows he's in for the long haul, but he's ready to put in the work.
I completely agree. I like the comments. We're getting a lot of positive feedback, which I think is the first step for fans to be on board, and we see that
definitely
a lot. Some comments on Chris Davis, and I'm happy they brought him up just because, of course, we're going to talk about him. We saw him at spring training, excuse me. We saw him at FanFest getting ready for spring training.
Yep.
And the first thing I will say is he lost some weight. Looks a lot lighter, and he was the first one to say that. In fact, someone made a joke. You look thin, and he was like, is that a compliment?
Yeah.
I'm like, as a female, we'll take it, so compliment. No, he did. He looked a lot lighter. He seemed extremely happy and in such a good, jolly mood. He said a lot of fans were going up to him, actually, and saying, hey, we wish you the best of luck, have a good season. And I think he was really appreciative of that positive comments to him at FanFest. He struggled last year, right? I mean, he hit 168. It was abysmal for fans to watch. We get that. We know you're upset. There's a new hitting coach, a lot new eyes on him. And on top of that, analytics, which he said he was open to. So we're going to take your comments on Chris Davis and what you think and how much of a bounce back year you predict him to have. Feel free to comment along. But for now, let's just take a look at what Chris Davis said about his offseason.
I mean, I think there's no denying the recent success that teams have had with advanced analytics and having a staff that handles all that. I mean, for me, it would be foolish not to at least explore it. I think especially after last year and everything that we went through, there definitely need to be some changes. I think that there needs to be a good balance. It can't be all one way or all the other. I think that there is some good information out there. There are a lot of people that have different insights, different perspective, and I'm looking forward to working with those people, meeting those people, and kind of seeing what they have to offer. Really, just the last month of the season, it was such a grind. It was such a roller coaster ride for me, really not knowing what to expect going into the off season. But I really, once the season ended, just kind of took a deep breath and let it go. I mean, there was so much that went on away from baseball, having to deal with just failure on a constant basis, unmet expectations, and this is all personally. And I think by the time the season ended, I was just so tired that I was ready to turn the page. So, and I had a lot of work to do, so there wasn't a whole lot of time for me to sit back and feel sorry for myself. I wanted to explore a lot of options as far as my offense was concerned, my nutrition and training, and so I felt like the clock was ticking. I mean, anything above what I did last year would, I guess, be considered successful, but for me it's getting back to the player that I was in 2013, in 2012, in 2015, in years that I was productive, even in 16. Just being a threat in the lineup, being a guy that produces runs, that his teammates can count on to be there on both sides of the baseball. That for me is where I'm going to kind of define a successful season. I've never been a guy to throw out a lot of numbers. You guys know that. But to continue down this path that I've been on the last couple of years and make no adjustment and make no strides in a different direction, it just seems, I mean, I don't want to do it anymore. And I don't want to go through another season like I had last year again. And I don't think that'll happen. I really don't. So we'll see here shortly, I guess.
That was, of course, Chris Davis at Orioles FanFest. He spoke for maybe the longest amount of time of any player. It was
100%.
Almost 12 minutes. And he gave a lot of good information there, Sarah. Talked about how he's thinking into this offseason, what he's thinking about analytics and this new coaching staff and his overall mentality. A lot of good nuggets in there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He's open to analytics. He didn't say he's doing a lot of research on it now,
Right.
but he said anything that could help you in the game, especially the way it's going now, is going to be crucial. One thing that we didn't play that stuck out to me that Chris Davis said at FanFest was that even when Manny Machado last season was playing his best, the team was still losing.
Yeah.
So it goes to show that you need a full lineup. Everyone needs to kind of be on the same page and working extremely hard to get some wins. I think that stood out to me. Of course, he doesn't want to have the same season he had last year, but he did say there was no time to sit back and relax and dwell on it. He had work to do. He's been getting to that work. You could see there it looks a lot thinner. He's been working with old coaches that had some old eyes on him. He said through high school and when he was drafted, he went back to some old coaches in Texas and kind of just had him get back to his original stance. It wasn't a fluke what he did back in the day, right, a few seasons ago, but he needs to get back to those ways. I know Mike Elias and the new hitting coach Don Long and Brandon Hyde are all on board to bring back the Chris Davis that we saw before really the past 2 seasons.
Yeah, Riley Heisman Hook saying, I believe Chris will do much better this year. Having twins, traveling and working. Wow. Yeah, he has had a busy offseason. Chad Moore saying he does seem to be taking the blame and looks like he knows he has to change. Agreed. He does know he has to change. I think the frustrating part for a lot of Orioles fans is we heard him say a lot of the same things last year. In fact, he said at this FanFest, I felt great coming into last season. I felt like I was going to have a great year. Well, he didn't. So what has changed from last year to this year? What new information has he gained? He said it in that clip that you just heard. He's not afraid to try anything new. He's looking to experiment. But he said similar things last year. He tried bunting a few times the other way, and it didn't work out. So
he talked about the shift a little bit.
He did.
Also,
he did. He hates the shift, if you couldn't tell.
Most left-handed hitters hate the shift, but he really
Especially
hates,
him. Yeah.
him and his agent very much hate the shift.
Yeah, exactly. But the proof is in the pudding. We just have to see it on the field. The talk is great, but I would love to see him actually incorporate the analytics that this new front office is going to give him and make major changes.
I think also Don Long, the new hitting coach, a lot of people are commenting along. You'll hear from him in just a few minutes here. Said that what's interesting is the thought drives the process, and that's something that stuck out to me a lot during FanFest. And he was talking specifically about Chris Davis. When you're having these negative thoughts, especially as a hitter, and you can't get past it, that's typically what you're showing when you're at the plate. You're pressing, you're so anxious to do so much better. You know you're in a slump, and that's what's happening. So Don Long did point that out, and he did say he had some ideas for Chris. We'll get to that in just a few seconds, but I need to take one funny comment that's standing out to me right now, Paul. Samantha Schwinn said, spoke to Chris at FanFest, accidentally told him I loved him. LOL, I meant we love you, of course. Sure, Samantha, you love Chris Davis. No, that's funny. I'm sure he understood that you meant Orioles fans love him, but that's something I would do. I would somehow have a tongue-tied twist like that, and what the heck
we see it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
All the time with players that come up through the FanFest line at the MASN booth. They have like 5 seconds to get out exactly what they want, and they somehow screw it up and they leave them with a bad impression, then they think about that the rest of their lives.
Yes.
No pressure. No
pressure
at all.
Just think about what you're going to say. No, I'm kidding. That's something that happens to everybody. That's hilarious. I think he caught on that he meant you guys loved him. If not, he thinks you have a huge crush on him, whatever it may be. A lot of people are saying they wish Chris good luck. Seems like a nice guy, and they know he could bounce back. And it wouldn't take much for him to have a bounce back year. We know that, but I think his expectations are high. He's a veteran on this team, and he wants to lead this team to success. He's one of the few veterans left on this team, so he needs to perform. He knows that. He wants that, and of course, I think the new coaching staff will help him a ton, and we're going to see really here in just a few weeks.
Yeah, a lot of comments coming in. D. Martin Whitmer saying, yes, Chris will turn it around and have a great year. Tony Flores saying, we just need him to actually put in the work.
Very
Christy Lafferty saying, Chris will turn it around. So a lot of positive comments, but it's interesting because we talked about that clean slate that Brandon Hyde is coming in with. What is he going to think about Chris Davis? You have Trey Mancini. You're going to want to put him at first base as much as possible, especially considering the glut of young outfielders that you have on the way. So where does that leave Chris Davis? Is he going to be your DH if Mark Trumbo has to miss time? Or is he going to be on the bench? Because they were going to want to get a good look at these young guys. Chris Davis might find himself on the bench if these young guys are really making a push for a starting spot.
Very true. We heard Chris say at the end, I guess we're going to find out pretty soon, and he means that. We'll be at spring training. We'll get an eye. Are there any major adjustments we'll be able to see with our naked eye, or will lead into the season? How much work is he putting in? We'll be able to share that with you guys down from Sarasota. We talked about Don Long a ton now, who I'm very impressed with. He's the hitting coach, came from the Reds after 5 seasons with them, who had a tremendous offseason, and all other coaches had a lot to say about him. It only took about 3 seconds for Long to be asked about Chris Davis during our media interview with him, and of course he had answers. He said he wants to get to know all the hitters as people first, build that relationship, and then of course he could figure out what to do from there. But most importantly, what he said about Chris is he has some ideas, but we'll let you hear for yourself. This is Don Long, the new hitting coach.
I've got some ideas, but I'd rather hear from him first and see where he's at. I know that he's been working on some things this winter, and so I'd rather dive in as a starting point there and see what they are, and then make it a collaborative effort along the way.
He's one of the many guys who's going to get a fresh look at Chris Davis and try to figure out the issues. We heard earlier in the offseason that even Scott Boras, Chris Davis's agent, had something to say about how to get Chris Davis back on track. Don Long will have his hands on these hitters and will be able to shape and mold them, mostly young guys, but some veterans as well, like Chris Davis. He talked about building a culture. Don Long is going to be one of these guys that Brandon Hyde referred to as culture changers. Don Long is on the same page.
I think it's building a culture and really creating an environment where we're relentless in what we do and how we prepare and how we work and how open we are to getting better. And having, every hitter has their own identity, things they're good at, maybe some challenges they have, but we really want to build a group identity. We want to be known wherever we play as a team that's really tough, really tough. We don't want to pitch to them, really challenging to pitch to, and I think that's, as a group mindset, that's really important to us.
And while he's got experience dealing with some older guys, and he'll have to have his hands on Mark Trumbo, Chris Davis, and some others, his real experience with the Cincinnati Reds for a half-decade was taking young guys and developing them into major league talents. He's going to need to bring a lot of that to Baltimore.
Almost all the coaches have a player development background, which is going to be crucial for this rebuild, which is probably why they were brought on Brandon Hyde's staff. Yeah,
exactly. And if you're looking for specific proof when it comes to Don Long being able to shape hitters, there are a few names I'm going to throw at you. Scooter Gennett, who came to the Reds as, one of the best hitters in all of baseball, all around. He's a pretty good power hitter, obviously hits for average and is fast. This guy came to the Cincinnati Reds with very little experience, and he was able to become an incredible, one of the best, as mentioned, hitters in all of baseball. Beyond that, Eugenio Suarez turned into an all-star this year in his mid-20s, somebody who had potential but had never seen it realized until Don Long got his hands on him. And beyond that, Jose Peraza has turned into a very good young hitter at age 24. So Don Long has success stories. It seems like the Cincinnati Reds have been in a rebuilding mode for the half-decade, but that has given Don Long a chance to take young players with talent and shape them into productive major league players.
And they've had a tough team to hit against. to hit. They have a lot of top hitters. You said that, a lot of their young guys, and specifically, we talk about Chris Davis here, and you brought up the young guys, and that's where his expertise will come into play. Don Long was specifically asked about that. Is it easier to have these young players that, of course, don't have as much major league experience to show them a few tweaks? And he said, of course, he's really excited for that because you're going to see more differences in these young players than you're going to see in maybe guys like Chris Davis and Mark Trumbo who have their stance. They know what to do. It's maybe just tweaking really small things compared to you're looking at guys like Cedric Mullins or Austin Hayes, guys that can use a little bit more shaping and experience in the big leagues. This is one thing we're going to look out for and see how Don Long does. But first and foremost, he did say he's been talking to players. He wants to get to know their story, their family, and every single coach said that. You can't really do work until you know them as a person, how receptive they are to information. So that's also something we need to look out for.
Yeah, exactly. Taking more comments here on Coffee and Comments. Colin Clark said, I am loving the future. It's going to be exciting to watch. We're seeing Chris Davis will have a great turnaround season. I'm seeing 280 plus 45 homers, says Gene Sherbin. Wow.
Somebody save that comment. I'm going back to that at the end of the season. We're reviewing it to see if he's right.
If Chris wins Comeback Player of the Year, I think we'll know exactly who to come to that predicted that.
Sure. You're
David
probably right.
Hoffmaster saying, I like this coaching staff, and I think it's good, but I like the old one. And that's what a lot of players said, including Chris Davis, including Cedric Mullins. They took the time to appreciate what the old coaching staff had done. Obviously, Buck Showalter was beloved not just by the fans in the city, but by many of the players as well. They had positive things to say about him, about Dan Duquette, about these guys that helped them in their careers get to where they are. So we're definitely taking a moment to remember what Buck
course.
Showalter contributed to this team as well.
It's nothing against the old coaching staff, right? People love Dwayne Kirby. The one thing I will say that stands out.
People were upset that he didn't come back.
Of course, to everybody for this team, though, and I mentioned it before to you, Paul, is that they all have a player development background, and that's something you're going to need during this rebuild. I think if everyone stood still in the fact we did this rebuild, but it was a similar coaching staff, and Buck was still here, and Dan Duquette was still here, it wouldn't be the rebuild we have right now. You needed a clean house. You needed the hires you have.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed. Of course, time will tell. I get that. But for what I've learned with just talking with Brandon Hyde and even Doug Brocail, the new pitching coach, and a lot of these new instructors and coaches, I think there's a lot of good things to come from it.
The very patient group. Doug Brocail went up and talked to the media. His first answer was 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
I think we only have two questions in for him.
Exactly, I think
and
so.
He said that
and they were like,
in
all
his
right,
answers.
let's move on. Yeah, he's a little long-winded, but it shows he's patient as well. We're seeing more comments coming in. This one is pretty good from Jody O'Donnell. Reds had a lot more walks than the Orioles last year and fewer strikeouts. The Reds batted .254, which is not very great, but the O's batted .239. Yeah. And of course, the world champion Red Sox batted .268, so not too far from that Reds .254. If all those stats are correct, then that
I'm not
shows,
double checking them. I'm reading them from the comments.
Exactly.
I think you're right. You seem legit.
Exactly. But that is an overall approach, and I think that will definitely help. Fewer strikeouts, more walks, get on base, do the small things, especially because you look up and down this potential Orioles lineup, you don't see a whole lot of power there. I mean, you see maybe 25 homers.
Good base
from Trey
runners,
Mancini.
quick players.
A lot faster than the teams of old, but a lot fewer homers. So there's going to be a give and take.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think when we see all the hires, we look at them as a whole. Everyone's patient. Everybody's on board. Everybody is on the same page, which I always say is going to be the most crucial part of this rebuild. If there is a timeline, although it's hard to say, everybody does seem on board. And all the fans that went to listen to Mike Elias and Brandon Hyde speak at FanFest, I think had the same reactions.
Definitely.
But for now, let's take a look at Mike Elias, listen what he had to say on the potential timeline of this Orioles rebuild.
Look, Brandon went through this with the Cubs, and I went through this with the Astros, and both of those rebuilding processes went incredibly fast. I can't say that that's always going to be the case with these things. There's circumstantial factors that might affect the speed with which a team revisits the playoffs. I'm hopeful that we can do it. I know what we need to do in order to get there, but there's going to be a lot of things happening here. It's just going to depend on who we draft, how they do, how well they progress, how well the players here progress, who's in the minor league system right now. I said, like, when we were in Houston, we had Altuve and Keuchel. And Keuchel was not a heralded prospect at that time, and George Springer in the minor leagues already. And it took a while for Altuve and Keuchel to reveal themselves to be the talents that they are today. So just factors like that are going to dictate things, and we don't have total control over them. The most important thing for us is that we set a course, we remain disciplined towards our decision-making, and we all work hard and do a good job. And I think we'll get there, and we'll get there in the right amount of time.
A lot of interesting things we can glean from Mike Elias talking in front of the media at FanFest. Something that really stuck out to me is he mentioned that when he took over with the Astros as the assistant GM, they already had Keuchel, Altuve, and Springer already in the Astros organization at some point. The fact that he mentions that, I think, says that he doesn't necessarily see an Altuve, a Springer, a Keuchel in the Orioles system as he takes them over. But he also said Keuchel and Altuve hadn't yet proven themselves in 2012 when he took over. So maybe there are some guys currently in the Orioles organization, hidden gems that have yet to show themselves as the players that they can become. So the timeline is obviously up for grabs. They're not going to put a specific number on the years it's going to take for them to revisit the playoffs, but there are any number of factors that could play into this.
It's going to start with their #1 overall draft pick they have this year, and of course, who's in their farm system. You mentioned Dallas Keuchel and Altuve, who didn't really shine bright until they proved themselves a few years later. I think we look at guys like Yusniel Diaz, Ryan McKenna even, who was their DL Hall. These players are all young, but they are stellar in what they've been able to do in the minor league system. So I think if they can continue to grow, they'll be brought up, and I think it's a really good time for these players to show themselves, and they all mentioned this. It's a good time to be a young player in the Orioles organization. All you have to do is get past, let's say, AA. Have some really good stats. Show you're a hard worker, and you could have that opportunity later in the season or in the 2020 season. So I think they're all working really hard, guys like DJ Stewart, et cetera, to cut their teeth and try to make this opening day roster or be put on the 40-man.
And there are some interesting similarities when you look at Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias and the two teams that they came from, the Cubs and the Astros. Both those teams really started with their rebuilds with brand new GMs in 2012, and they took about 3 years to get back to the point where they were back into the playoffs. 2015, they made the playoffs. So 2012, 2013, 2014, they were in rebuilding years. 2015, both of those teams made the playoffs. 2016, the Cubs won the World Series. 2017, the Astros won the World Series. So they got back very quickly. There were 3 very difficult years. They lost at least 89 games each of those seasons for those 3 teams. But once they got back to the playoffs, they were able to win quickly because they had the culture, they had the right guys in place, and they were able to turn things around very quickly.
As you were really talking about these young guys and the rebuild, Paul, I was reading some comments, and you mentioned, talking about the rebuild, people brought up Trey Mancini and the lack of veteran roles in this clubhouse, and somebody says, how is Trey Mancini considered a veteran? And I asked him the same exact thing. Is he ready to take on this role, and what expectations he has for the team? So right now, take a look on the veteran, Trey Mancini, what he had to say at FanFest.
You see everybody out there today. It's just as many people, I feel like, that always come here, and everybody's really excited. And, you know, we're going to, like I said, we're going to come out every day and play hard and you know, not give in. And if we do that, I think we can exceed expectations. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys, a lot of us came up through the system, and I think that's important. And spring training is going to be really competitive, and it's going to be an extremely important time for us to get ready.
Seems like just yesterday this guy was a rookie and his mom was going crazy in the stands as he was getting his first major league hit.
That was 2 months ago.
Yeah, it honestly feels like it. Now he's a veteran on this team, but we talked about it, Sarah, before we went on air. Trey Mancini seems a whole lot more mature already than where he was at this point maybe last year.
Could not agree more. Something that's hilarious but also very true that he said, and you'll know what I'm talking about in a second. When I asked, are you ready to take on this veteran role again? And he said, the thing that's changed is that last year I was asking players about what do I do about my 401k plan and learning about the union and different stuff all around the MLB. And he said, I'm now just kind of sprucing up, learning some information on what people should do with their 401k when players are going up and asking him about that. So it's not only baseball, but things aside about family, living situations, etc. The young guys are going to Trey Mancini. He's a really approachable player.
Absolutely.
And he's also not afraid to gain information as well as, of course, give advice, which I think is going to be really crucial when you show you're that humble. Similar to what, a different level, but Adam Jones was the same way. He was really receptive to young players, and Trey Mancini has that same aura about him.
Exactly, and he's already been through some struggles in his young career. It's not like he has had a sparkling career so far. He did have a really poor first half of the season last year, but the way he battled back and was able to overcome that, hit .216 the first half, .275 the second half, lowered his strikeout rate, increased his walk rate, increased his home run rate. So Trey Mancini has gone through some things and he's come out on the other side, and he's in a great spot right now. He's 26 years old, but he doesn't hit arbitration until after next year, and then there's 3 more years before he becomes a free agent. So
nobody's mad about that watching right now.
Exactly. So the fact that, you know, he came up a little bit older puts him in a spot where he can be a veteran on this team. There's no pressure to trade him right now, and he can stick around, mentor these young guys, and help them cut their teeth in Major League Baseball.
Mike Elias at winter meetings in Vegas, I asked, is anybody untouchable, including guys like Trey Mancini? And he said, during a rebuild, I wouldn't claim anybody as untouchable, but it's rare I'd move a guy like Trey Mancini. So we also need to keep in mind, this is a guy that's here for the rebuild, through the rebuild, and he will lead this team, in my opinion, which brings other comments coming in. Linda saying Trey could make a fantastic leader in the clubhouse. D, he'll be a great team leader this year. Jason Martin, Trey Mancini, young enough to relate to what the new players are going through. He'll become a great leader for the Orioles, knows how to play the game the right way. Couldn't agree more with that.
Gene Sherbin saying Trey can be a consistent 20 to 25 homer guy. It's what he did in his first 2 Major League seasons, hit, what, 24 and then 25. And that is so crucial.
When he came 3rd place for Rookie of the Year.
Exactly. So crucial as to this team in particular. If Chris Davis isn't hitting bombs, if Mark Trumbo is going to miss time or be traded, they really don't have any pop. Cedric Mullins isn't going to be a power hitter. Maybe DJ Stewart, but beyond that, who do you have? Your infield is not a group that is going to produce a lot of home runs. Maybe VR can give you 20 a season, but there's really not much beyond that. So having a guy that consistently hit home runs in the middle of your lineup, you can't just throw anybody in the 4-hole and expect him to put pressure on the pitcher. So you need somebody that can hit homers. Trey Mancini can be that guy.
We're wrapping up the show. We're going to take some final comments. If you guys are just tuning in now, if you comment, you're actually automatically entered to win 2 of these incredible mugs we gave away at FanFest. Mine has lipstick all over it. I'm sorry about that.
How can we tell that one's yours?
I don't know. You want to trade? Goodbye home run. Kerry Thorne's signature home run call on these amazing MASN mugs. These are my favorite mugs, legitimately.
They're
Not
awesome.
just saying that.
They're absolutely awesome.
Comment along. You could win. But let's take some more, Paul. Let's get through it. So many comments coming in, which I love to see.
Yeah.
People are getting excited, including Robert Blake. Trust the process. Love that.
Love that.
You
Absolutely
love that,
love
too.
to see that as a Sixers fan.
Phil is actually saying Mancini, VR, and Wins will be our leaders. I agree with Mancini and VR. Austin Wins is a player we didn't talk about yet, but somebody that also impresses me very much so. He actually worked with Rick Dempsey in the offseason, working on his defense. He was in such a good mood at FanFest that it brought such good vibes to the media room.
Yeah.
This is a player I think will make the opening day roster. I think he proved himself last season. He's always eager to work, and if you look at him on game days, he's the most locked in person in the clubhouse, which is what I really like about him. He studies so many hitters, he studies so many pitchers, and the young pitchers and the veteran pitchers trust him, which says a lot about Austin Wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's such a funny guy. When he's loose, like at an event like that, his last question after they finished the media availability, he turned to us and said, "Oh man, I'm done."
Yeah, he
like
was
very
bummed.
upset. He's hilarious. So he's a guy I think agreed with that. It's a low key, but leader I think he'll be, but somebody who could be crucial to this team if he sticks around for a while.
Yes.
What about our pitching staff, says David Allen. We didn't touch on it a whole lot because, well, we really don't know. We really don't know at this point. Obviously, Dylan Bundy is going to be around, but beyond that, we heard Miguel Castro talk. Maybe he could be in line for a starting spot. We obviously know Cashner and Cobb for the moment are sticking around. They've got starting spots locked up. Beyond that, beyond those 3, really anybody could be competing for those spots. Jimmy Yacobonis showed some flashes, but those spots are wide open.
Even Doug Brocail, the new pitching coach, said, I know I have really 3 frontline starters and the rest of the spots are open. You know you need a solid 6 guys to build that rotation, maybe even 7 to last through the season.
Yeah.
A guy like Miguel Castro, in my opinion, is going to stick in the relief role and be that long arm out of the bullpen. I think he succeeded more there. I can't imagine them trying to stretch him out as a starter again. But guys like Jimmy Yacobonis and David Hess will be fighting for those roles. So who knows? They could sign a last-minute 1-year veteran pitcher and try to get him maybe as a trade chip later in the season.
Exactly. Those deals.
Also look out for that as a catcher.
Yes, catcher as well, because Chance Sisco said at FanFest he wants to be the starting catcher, but he hasn't shown that yet. He hit close to 200 last year and bounced up and down between the minors and the bigs. So Chance Sisco and Austin Wins, I expect they'll try to get something done with Caleb
Perez
Joseph.
signed that minor league deal. Yeah.
So there is still a number of guys out there. The market is moving very slowly. The O's, I don't think, are done in free agency.
No, completely agree. I'm trying to take some final comments.
Yep.
Nick Morris, I haven't been this excited for Orioles baseball in a while. We aren't stagnant. I'm just grateful we're making the steps to being a great team. Nick, yes.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil Zanti saying Givens, Blyer, Fry, Castro, Carroll, bullpen. That's pretty solid. At least the first.
Tanner Scott as well. I think he showed some stretches of his amazing fastball to work himself to a stable guy in that bullpen.
And Richard Blyer, we didn't touch on in this show, but he said he's on track for opening day. So he's hoping to be back and ready for that. We forget how good this guy was because he played only half a season last year, but he was lights out coming out of the Orioles bullpen. A lefty. He could be a huge trade chip at the deadline, or they might want to hold on to him, try to turn him into a starter, do whatever with this guy. If he is the guy that they saw in 2018, wow, that's a huge help.
Yep, couldn't agree more. People are loving the show, so thanks for watching. We really appreciate it.
Saints fan getting in.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. I'm not even going to comment on the Saints because I'm just bummed they're not playing this weekend. I don't even want to go into that right now. A lot of comments on Chris Davis. People cannot wait for the season to start. A leader on the pitching staff, Phil, is also commenting along saying Cobb. I agree. I think Cobb is a leader. I think Cashner actually will be the leader of the starting rotation. We saw it even last season. This guy hates to lose more than he loves to win, and I rarely say that about players. He is so competitive. And I think if there's one guy that can capture the entire clubhouse and be the leader, and not only just as a pitcher, it is Andrew Cashner. People listen when he talks.
Yeah, absolutely. Other comments, Jackie Anders with an adorable dog in her profile picture saying, win or lose, I am an Oriole fan and I stick by them. We're seeing a lot of positive comments as well. It's just it's a new era in Orioles baseball, and the fact that these guys were there at FanFest and took questions from the audience, took time out of their day to talk to Orioles fans and answer questions, I think that goes a long way in helping the Orioles fans understand they're in with it. You know, they're in for the long haul. They want to see this team get to the place where they can not only return to the playoffs, but win a World Series.
Two final players I want to touch on before we sign off here. Starting with Austin Hayes and Ryan Mountcastle. I'm seeing some comments come in about both of them.
Yes.
I'll start with Austin Hayes because I think he has a good shot at making the opening day roster. He impresses me, and when I saw him at Double-A before he had ankle surgery, he was a little bit hesitant on talking too much about what was going on. But after, when I talked to him, he said he was feeling great, if not better than ever. He's pretty much accomplished everything he needs to do except running the bases and finalizing those little tweaks. He's been working nonstop this offseason. His goal is to make the opening day roster. He's come up through the system with guys like Trey Mancini and Cedric Mullins and DJ Stewart. So he wants to be here just as much as the others. I think if he proves himself in spring training and he shows that he's healthy, he's going to be a guy to look out for to make the opening day roster. He's strong. We know he has a good arm. He's amazing defensively. Hit some home runs in spring training. He's making the opening day roster as an extra outfielder.
Interesting call there, but I think there's a good chance he does as well. You touched on Ryan Mountcastle. I can take it from there. Ryan Mountcastle said he's coming to spring training with his third base glove. He's expecting to try to play third base. He thinks he can do it. He's made huge strides defensively in that area. So Ryan Mountcastle expects and hopes to be the third baseman of the future. Look, the guy has got an outstanding bat. He's a very solid, very consistent hitter with a lot of pop. Ryan Mountcastle, there's a reason that he's the #1 prospect in the Orioles system by many accounts. So Mountcastle, I don't know if he'll be on the team to start opening day, but if he can push for the starting third baseman job in a year or two, this guy is going to be awesome when he hits the bigs.
One final player, we'll touch more on him next week, Yusniel Diaz. That's another guy we need to look out for. I haven't seen him too much really play, so I need to wait till Sarasota to gather my final thoughts on him.
Yeah, but a guy who can do it all. Guy who's not outstanding in any one area, but he's shown flashes of speed, power, consistency at the plate. That guy has all the tools to be a good Major League Baseball player.
Yes. Tongue-tied. Long show.
Long show indeed.
Thank you so much for watching
comments.
Coffee and Comments with MASN All Access. If you commented along, you could win these amazing mugs.
They're awesome.
I need to chug some coffee and water. I'm exhausted from talking so much. We're so excited for Orioles baseball. We know you are too, so thank you so much for watching all season long. We will be on MASN All Access. You'll see us here and in spring training in Sarasota.
Yeah, less than 3 weeks until spring training.
Warm weather. Hope to see you guys down there. But we'll be back next week. We'll chat some more then.
She's Sara Perlman. I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks for watching.
Bye, you guys.